This is how explosively the morning began in the tiny Russian village with the melodious name Kryastove, which is 600 kilometers from Ukraine. Kryastov has only 70 residents, but at the same time, every day, several thousand Russians work here at one of the largest warehouses of the Wildberries marketplace. Or rather, used to work. At least several drones fly into the warehouse, which covers 176,000 square meters. This is only what is being filmed by eyewitnesses and now former employees. Fires break out instantly. This Russian Wildberries warehouse is located in the suburbs of Vladimir, a city whose existence, as it turns out, not all Russians are aware of. So these strikes also help Russian citizens brush up on the geography of their own country.
-1 warehouse in Vladimir. Turns out there really is such a city in Russia. Another Wildberries warehouse. It's still burning, still smoking right before our eyes, you could say. That's what this morning looks like. This is already the 13th or 14th warehouse. I honestly can't even remember anymore.
And let me remind you, this is already the 18th warehouse of the Russian marketplace Wildberries that has been attacked by Ukrainian drones in the past 17 days.
Honestly, it's not great. Waking up every morning like this and watching, well, today we've lost another million. So in total, that's already -11 million for us.
Officially, Ukraine has not confirmed the attack on this warehouse near Volodymyr. However, the commander of the unmanned systems forces, Madyar, gave a very clear hint that our Iron Birds paid a visit there.
Vladimir Salam. The explosives burned down.
Unknown drones also visited Russian Gelendzhik on the Black Sea coast today. A Russian mobile fire group tried to shoot one of them down, and eventually the drone fell right onto Russians who were relaxing on the shore. Local authorities reported that 7 Russians died and at least 40 were injured. Notably, the recreation base Razvet, where the drone fell, belongs to the rocket design bureau NPO Mashinostroyenia, which specializes in the development and production of missile systems, cruise and hypersonic missiles, and spacecraft. And this is what last night's attack on the Belgorod Technological University looked like, where, according to Russian media and the university itself, drones were developed and tested.
Everything is on fire there, absolutely everything. Look, you can even see the stairwell. Yeah, that's where they make unmanned aerial vehicles and teach how to operate them. They just blew the whole thing up.
I should note that this summer, the Belgorod University officially announced the enrollment of school children for summer sessions to study a course on drone development. In addition, according to the Russian local media outlet Pepel, Russian soldiers could also have been stationed in the university building. Officially, the Ukrainian side has not commented on this attack. Alina Matvichuk, Vikna program, STB United News. In July, the area of Ukrainian land occupied by the Russians increased by 36 square kilometers. This is according to data from the Deep State resource, and this is the smallest figure at least since 2023. For comparison, in July 2025, the enemy managed to advance by 564 square kilometers. At the same time, the trend where the defense forces of Ukraine managed to liberate more land than the Russians captured did not continue in July. We are discussing the situation on the battlefield with retired Colonel of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Serhiy Hrabsky. Mr. Serhiy, welcome.
Greetings. Good evening.
What do these figures, 36 square kilometers of Russian advances in a month, mean to you? Can we say that the front has stabilized?
You know, ma'am, I wouldn't say so. And do you know what concerns me? What concerns me is the intensity of the fighting that we are currently seeing, which is reflected in the same deep state maps you mentioned. Unfortunately, as of today, the enemy still has the potential that allows them to conduct such active combat operations and exert constant pressure on our positions. At the same time, compared to what we have seen, namely the intensity of the fighting and the territory that was occupied by the enemy, it shows that the enemy has not succeeded and is still failing to achieve what is called an operational breakthrough or a strategic breakthrough in this war. and thus we will continue to observe approximately the same intensity of combat operations. But it is important to understand the following. We are paying a very high price for this as well. Our guys are heroically holding back the enemy, mainly on the Eastern Front, because in the South, as a result of active actions involving middle strikes and deep strikes, the situation looks a bit different. But at the same time, it should be understood, as of today, unlike in 2024 or 2025, which you mentioned, the situation does not look as dramatic as it did back then. Because according to the very same statistical figures, despite the fact that Deep State showed the enemy forces were advancing, there are also specific numbers indicating that we are also moving forward. And according to some data, there is certain sensitive information that simply cannot yet be disclosed to the public. So we will continue to wait for additional official updates. Most likely this information will be released in August. But what worries me, what makes me uneasy, is that despite the fact that the enemy has not achieved any significant advantages on the front line, they continue to apply pressure and are even trying to increase the intensity of combat operations. This is exactly what we are seeing now along the entire front line.
If we make some interim conclusions about the Russian spring-summer offensive campaign, of course, August is still ahead, and unfortunately, September and October are also quite favorable for the enemy to advance further. What can we see? What have they managed to achieve, and what have they failed to accomplish from what they had planned?
You know, as of today, they haven't managed to achieve anything at all. Nothing has worked out because even if we take as an intermediate objective the one set by the enemy, namely to fully take control of the settlements of Pokrovsk, Kostiantynivka, Chasiv Yar, and to ensure uninterrupted use of the road connecting Bakhmut to Kostiantynivka and further to Pokrovsk, they have not succeeded in this task and they are still desperately trying to accomplish it. That is, even such intermediate objectives have proven, as they say, too much for them to handle. But at the same time, we must understand that the enemy is not giving up on their active operations. And this shows that we need to take energetic measures to strengthen our defense. Because, you know, over the past few months, we've been using the word infiltration very widely. So infiltration in the broad and very general sense of the term means that the enemy is actively trying to find our defensive gaps or the various weak spots between our current positions, and then attempting to quietly slip through these positions unnoticed. Unfortunately, no one in this world has come up with any solutions for this yet, except for increasing and tightening the combat formations. And therefore, the further course of events, despite the unsuccessful results we have received, as you put it, at this intermediate stage, will depend on how dense our defense is and how strong our fortifications are. And as you understand, no fortification makes any sense if it is not defended by a sufficient number of troops. This means that we still face very serious challenges ahead. It cannot be said that that's it. The enemy has failed in their objective. They will continue trying to push forward. And the further course of events depends on our resilience, our supply, and our strengthening of the defense.
Moreover, Russia is likely preparing for mobilization. President Volodymyr Zelensky also mentioned this, saying that intelligence has such information. Recently, Russian social media channels have been spreading information that people are being actively recruited at Russian military enlistment offices, and vacancies are being opened there. The figure mentioned was 500,000 mobilized. How realistic does this number sound to you?
Well, you know, theoretically, if you ask whether Russia can mobilize, sorry, not mobilize, but gather 500,000 people, I can answer, yes, it can. But the problem is that gathering people and carrying out all the steps from mobilization to operational deployment are two completely different things. Because these people need to be placed in certain locations, they need to be clothed, they need to be given shoes, they need to be fed, and they need to be trained. And all of this depends on the capabilities of the Russian economy. Of course, we say that the Russian economy is quite powerful, and they can throw everything they have into ensuring this level of mobilization. But at the same time, it should be understood that there may not be enough command personnel, and most likely there really isn't enough to deploy such a number of troops. 500,000 is, more than 60% of the active ground forces of the Russian Federation. That is, they need to be deployed and staffed with a sufficient number of command personnel, which Russia simply does not have. And there is also such a thing as the throughput capacity of training centers, ranges, and training facilities. So we can say that the real numbers of Russian mobilization could be well, excuse me, the traditional figures, as we've come to call them, 320 to 350,000. The problem is different. The mobilized people will be treated as expendable material and will be used, as battering ram cannon fodder. So we should expect that the enemy will increase pressure on our positions. And here I can guarantee you they will not care about losses at all. Because in fact, those who are fighting now, those who can be called the contract army, by default become what are called blocking detachments. They will simply drive these mobilized men to their deaths, but that doesn't make things any easier for us. We just need to understand what resources we have in order to stop this onslaught, which could pose a serious threat to our defense.
So if Russia throws 350 to 200,000 additional people to the front, right now the enemy grouping in Ukraine numbers over 700,000, then what could these additional several hundred thousand mean for us? And in your opinion, does the scenario of opening a new section of the front, for example, in northern Ukraine, then look realistic?
Well, this fits perfectly into the traditional concept of an offensive operation that the Russian Federation conducts. We have to realize that, of course, the main focus will continue to be on the Donetsk direction, where the enemy will keep pressing our positions with the aim, ultimately, perhaps already in the 5th year of the war, although they will not succeed in this either, of completing the occupation of Donetsk region. But at the same time, why do I call this concept traditional? Because it involves such notions as, firstly, secondary strikes, diversionary attacks, or the creation of certain demonstrative actions. And accordingly, well, let's say for the average civilian, this is called opening new sections of the front. But we both understand perfectly well that the Russian Federation simply will not be able to organize two parallel offensives using significant forces and resources. Thus, we may find ourselves in a situation where it is unclear where the enemy can exert stronger or weaker pressure. And this will lead to the fact that we will be forced to keep reserves at the most remote sections of the front, waiting for some kind of offensive, waiting for some kind of strike. Because don't forget, the enemy is attacking our territory. The task of the armed forces of Ukraine, of the defense forces of Ukraine as a whole, is to defend our territory. We cannot simply give up, say, some part of the Chernihiv, Kharkiv, or Sumy regions just to hold back a breakthrough by the enemy in other sections of the front. And this brings us back to what we talked about earlier, about strengthening and intensifying mobilization measures. Sorry, we don't have any other options.
You mentioned that the Russians still won't be able to capture Donetsk region. Why do you think so?
You see, here's the thing. The point is that the defense concept we have now created, a deep maneuverable defense combined with what is called a kill zone, essentially eliminates the possibility of using large amounts of weaponry, equipment, and personnel all at once. We remember how, in July, the enemy carried out what is called a psychological attack using the forces of 2 or 3 armies, I can't recall exactly. And during this attack, the equivalent of only about a company in killed personnel and almost a battalion's worth of equipment was destroyed. But at the same time, we must understand that the enemy can keep up the pressure by constantly infiltrating using small groups of troops. And this, takes time, it takes resources, and such actions are extremely costly. That is, the enemy, instead of, if we compare it, instead of using a powerful stream of water to break through a wall, will try to erode and undermine our defense drop by drop. And it is quite strong. It is well prepared from an engineering standpoint, and it protects people who know what war is and understand how to strike the enemy. So the task for the enemy becomes more complicated. And here another question arises. How ready will the enemy be to replenish their losses as a result of such active combat operations? But I repeat once again, there will be no traditional war for the enemy. He will be forced to continue using what we now call low intensity but continuous combat operations, which are very costly. But in this way, he hopes to achieve results. But again, it's all about time, and more time. That is, you see, in the traditional concept, an offensive advances at a pace of about 25 to 30 kilometers after breaking through the main line of defense. But here the enemy is clawing forward by mere tens of meters. And even the specific point that you brought up at the very beginning about the territory that is currently under occupation, 36 square kilometers along a front line of more than 1,200 kilometers, is in fact a practically invisible tiny speck on the map if you look at the entire comprehensive map of Ukraine.
Mr. Serhiy, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on the situation at the front. That was Serhiy Hrabsky, retired colonel of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.